It's not citizenship, it's permanent residency.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay. And then that creates a path toward citizenship.
Yes,
But
yes.
you're not going to become a citizen after
Right.
1 year. So should we treat people who are fleeing basically genocide in Syria differently than people who are fleeing the gangs in Honduras?
For me personally, that's a difficult question because I would love to just let everyone, if it was possible, I'd be like, yeah, everyone come over, I'd love that. But we as a nation can't really support that. So I think another thing is when you're getting visas and refugee status, there's like a preferential system, and whoever fills out their application first, it's kind of like a first come, first serve. You're going to get in first. So unfortunately, that's the reality, but I think it's a good way because I think it should be first come, first serve in that manner.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
On this refugee line, I'd like to take it in a little different context, if I may. Do you think Joseph and Mary and Jesus had refugee status, and that their circumstances could be similar to what we might call a refugee in 2019?
That's a really good question.
Did they flee Bethlehem?
Yes.
Did they have a valid reason for leaving? Was there a threat?
Yes. I'm not sure. But if we're going biblical, then we have a verse that I think kind of sums up our stance, and that would be Romans 13:1-5. And it's, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. So, and that's also in the New Testament. So, again, this is difficult for me because I would love that to be able to happen, but I think it's just something that we have to do for the better of the country as a whole. Because if you look at sanctuary cities, although they're a good idea in theory, if you really look at them as themselves, it's just not a good place. You don't want to be there, and we don't want our nation to become a sanctuary nation, in my opinion, if that's what that's going to look like.
So why don't you define sanctuary cities and talk about some of the problems that occur there?
A sanctuary city refers to a municipal jurisdiction that limit their cooperation with the national government's effort to enforce immigration laws. And there are more than 300 in the United States.
Yeah, so basically, sanctuary city bars the police from reporting illegal immigrants to ICE, and so they're shielded from deportation. And currently, there's 9 states that are considered sanctuary states and 172 U.S. cities and/or counties.
And so what are the consequences of that for the people that live in those areas?
So let's say you're an illegal immigrant and you're driving down the road and your taillight is out. If you get pulled over by a cop, ICE can't come detain you. You can go to jail or get a fine or whatever your crime is, I guess. But if you're not in sanctuary city, ICE can come detain you.
Okay, so I understand that. What are the consequences for the the legal residents of those cities?
I mean, it completely contradicts federal law by saying, okay, you're here, you don't have your documents. Like, let's say you are driving and you get pulled over. I mean, if I'm driving and I get pulled over and I don't have my license, there's consequences for that. So the fact that these people can drive and they don't have any documentation whatsoever, and the police can say, okay, you can go, I can't detain you, I won't detain you. It's not fair to all of us as citizens just because the rules are bent for them and they don't have the proper documentation.
And I think another thing, Lauren actually found this, was that Mohammed Atta, who was one of the leaders of the 9/11 hijack attack, he was actually stopped and ticketed for driving without a license in Florida in early 2001. And he was, it's like
They let him go.
They let him go. So like places in California like that that do this on a regular basis, we're never sure that this couldn't happen again or something in that manner.
Well, 2001 was before sanctuary cities.
Right.
I don't know that he was an illegal immigrant at that point. He may have been here on a
Yeah,
student
we were
visa or
just
something
using that
like
as an example as something that happens on a normal basis of them being let go for DUIs or not using road signs.
What I'm interested, did you find any research on the impact on social services in those cities? So, state provided or city provided welfare, healthcare, and food.
One thing we did find kind of interesting was in San Francisco, it's so dirty and unkept that there's a public service department, and they had a online account called the SF311 where you could report different trash or actually human feces, and it wasn't efficient enough that this one San Francisco resident actually created his own app called SnapCrap, where you take a picture of human feces and you send it into the Public Works Department and they come and clean it up. And so I think that kind of represents how what the situation is in those areas.
Is that from homelessness, or is that from illegal immigration that they're having those problems in San Francisco?
I think it's a combination. I think it's kind of just the city as a whole, like how it's let itself go, kind of.
When you mentioned healthcare, they pay American citizens finance $18.5 billion in healthcare a year for undocumented immigrants, and then I found a report that said that the total cost of illegal immigration is $135 billion a year for taxpayers. So that's just in every aspect, covering it all. It's $135 billion. And then people make the argument that, oh well, some illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants pay taxes. Well, they only pay $19 billion in taxes, and so that leaves $116 billion on citizens to pay through local, state, and federal taxes. So really, it doesn't even put a dent in the number that we have to provide.
Well, and you just correct yourself, and it kind of reminded me of a question I had at the beginning of this. I think when I was growing up, I heard illegal alien, and now we're undocumented immigrant. Where's the difference there, and why are we changing our terminology?
I think, well, personally, I think people use undocumented because it doesn't sound as harsh. However, I refer to them as illegal aliens because that is what they are. Undocumented, I think, is like a cop-out word. Like, oh, they're undocumented. No, they're illegal. They're not supposed to be here.
So it's a nicer way of saying
Yes,
it?
it is, and I think it's...
Why do we need a nicer way of saying it?
I read the reason, which I didn't understand this, but I read the reason people say undocumented is because the action that they're doing is illegal, but then they themselves are not illegal. Which, because people are like, oh, you sell drugs, the action you're doing is legal, but you're not illegal. But technically, I mean, your presence in our country is an illegal thing. So I refer to them as illegal.
Maya, your thoughts on this? Undocumented immigrant versus illegal alien? Why are we changing
Well, it's
terminology?
funny because it's really a civil violation, so I think that's kind of why they call it undocumented.
So we should call them uncivil immigrants?
I guess.
I think it's an example of the media's influence, especially, I mean, you see predominantly left newspapers, news channels, they refer to them as undocumented, and I think it's a way of kind of normalizing it, making it okay, and watering it down, like Lauren said, making it less of an issue than it really is.
Because undocumented sounds better than illegal.
Yeah.
So I think that's just,
I think that's an accurate statement. Mrs. Eiler hit on this a minute ago, and I wanted to circle back to it, about the impact of illegal immigration, regardless of how you feel about undocumented immigrants or not, or whether they should be welcome or they should not. There's an economic impact on the social structure of our country, right? If you're here, there are certain things
Right.
that, there are certain consumables, there are certain services that will be provided to you regardless. Thinking specifically about healthcare.
Right.
If somebody comes in and they're wounded, maimed, something, and they go into a hospital, we're not gonna ask them for their insurance card on the way in, right? We're gonna
Right.
treat them.
Right.
Or if they're pregnant and getting ready to deliver a baby,
Right.
we're gonna deliver that baby, right? I think as early as yesterday, or as late as yesterday, recently as yesterday, I think I saw that Bernie Sanders, one of the political candidates running for president, had said that he wants Medicare for all, including illegal immigrants. How do we feel about that? Is that a normal stand? Does that line up with the nation's expectations for what we should be doing with our healthcare system? Is that a popular stance right now? What are we thinking?
I would say Bernie is a very polarizing figure, I guess.
Okay.
He's the very end of the spectrum. So, Trump would be one, Bernie would be the other.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say that a majority would agree with that. I would say an okay percentage would align with that. But I think, again, that's a very far-reaching opinion. And so I don't think most people would support that. In regard to healthcare, I think I know that like liberals left lean more towards providing more healthcare, as you see with like Medicare, Medicaid, all of that. So I think those people would be more inclined to support and represent
Is
that.
that because they're more compassionate?
Maybe.
Mike?
But,
I saw a chuckle there, I just didn't know what's behind the chuckle.
I think that like healthcare for all is a great idea, like, but I just think it's unrealistic. People
so?
wouldn't get all like, we'd run out of money to provide all the healthcare benefits, and like, not everyone can get a $300,000 surgery or a heart transplant. We just don't have that.
Or people who offer Medicare for all and anybody can get anything they want, are they more compassionate?
No, and I would say no, I don't, I think it sounds good. It sounds good to say, yeah, I think everybody should be able, you know, even people, you know, anybody come and we'll give you this, that, and the other, but I think that the problem with that is that we need to put I stick to this, that we need to put our citizens first. And I think that, okay, if we have these 11, 12 million illegal immigrants, you know, coming in on top of, I think there's not enough resources, I don't think, to, you know, treat our citizens and then treat these people who don't belong in our country as legal immigrants.
I'd like to switch back to DACA for just a second. If you had a person that went to Lexington Christian Academy, maybe they were in the 10th or 11th grade, they've been here since 2nd grade, they're on the soccer team, their primary language is English, but their parents brought them here as a 2-year-old. Are they Americans, and should they be deported?
I had my dad.
This is your classmate, by the way.
Yes. I talked to my dad, asked me this question when I was like, you know, kind of practicing for this. And this is a very tricky question because, you know, they basically lived here their whole life, but technically they weren't born here. So they're technically, by the Constitution, they're not a citizen because they weren't born here. However, I think that there should be a way to possibly, I think the parents should be deported and they should have a choice about what their child can stay or they can take their child with them. So that way it's not on us that we're separating families. They can choose to take their child with them or they can leave their child here. However, I think that there should be a way for a child like that to be able to get a granted legal status since they've been here practically their whole life.
So where do you draw the line? How long?
That's the tricky part, is that it's like, what age do you say, okay, now you gotta go. That's the tricky part, and I don't have a perfect answer for that. And I think that would take, I mean, if that were ever to be a real possibility, that would take a lot of, you know, you'd have to, I mean, there's not a perfect age for it, and so that's the only issue with it, other than, you know, just saying, okay, you'll have to go back with your family.
Well, what if mom and dad now have been here 20 years?
You're still 20 years illegal, even if you've been here.
Right, but you no longer have any family back in your home country. Everybody's died.
Mhm.
Your property was taken when you left. You've got nothing back there.
I think
You
that's-
built a reasonable life here.
I would say that that's the consequences of your actions of coming illegally. We have to draw a standard. We can't draw a standard and say there's this exception, this exception, this exception, because, I mean, if you give someone an inch, they're gonna take a mile, and eventually it's just gonna lead to chaos. So I think we should draw a standard and say, if you're here legally, it doesn't matter how long you've been here, if we find you, you have to go back, and that's the risk they're gonna have to be willing to take if they do wanna cross the border or overstay their visa.
Even if they served in the military?
if you serve in the military, your child can apply for a visa and get citizenship.
Did the 2-year-old that came with their parent do anything illegal or wrong?
No, it's not the child's fault, and I think one thing that we were discussing about the age, I think it's the job of the parent. If the parents know they're legal, they know their child doesn't know. So I think it's important to inform their child on that. And so if there were to be a set cutoff for when they had to apply for citizenship, they would be aware and they would be able to do that themselves, because if they had no knowledge, then it would be out of their control at that point.
So, in general, are you saying that you all are in favor of eliminating DACA?
I like the idea of DACA. The thing about DACA was that it was supposed to be a stopgap until we addressed immigration reform, and it kind of just stuck around. I think I think it's a really good idea. I think a lot of the opposition stems from the fact that it was an executive order, and I think that executive orders themselves bring up a lot of contempt just because of what they are. And so I think a lot of people would have had more support for DACA if it was instituted in a different way, maybe gone through some more through Congress in a better way instead of just one person deciding what happens.
I would agree with what she said. I think the idea of it is, I think it's a good idea. I mean, these are, most of them are kids, because I think it's under 31 that you can apply for it, right?
Yeah.
So most of them are children though, and the problem with it is that it completely, like I said, if we were gonna have a set standard and you can't really, there shouldn't be any exceptions, that it completely bends the rules of saying, but if you can get over here, we'll give you education, you can be a part of this, and like I said, like Jalen said, it kind of got out of hand, what it was meant to be, and then kind of, now there's nearly 1 million people that have it, so I don't think that was its initial goal, but it kind of snowballed into something a little bigger than what it was supposed to be.
So last week, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in a case to get rid of DACA. Based on the questions that were asked during that oral argument, it sounds like a number of the justices are leaning toward the separation of powers argument, saying, wait a minute, immigration is delegated to Congress, not the president. And so really, Obama had no business doing this. If the Supreme Court rules, when they probably draft the decision next June, that DACA's gone, what happens to those youths, and what should Congress's response be?
So if DACA were to end, the final renewal would end by March 5th, 2020, I believe. And so at that point, they can't accept, they already can't accept applications, but they can no longer renew for those students. I'm not exactly sure what their plan is to deal with those 798,000.
And who do you mean by they?
Congress. But I do think that there should be, for the people that are already here in that program, there should be a leniency to where they have a certain amount of time to apply for a visa, because I don't think it's okay to send them back once they've already been through the program.
I agree with you. I would say the same thing, that, it's a lot of people that have this, so I think it would be very hard to send all 800,000 of them back, because, obviously it takes a long time to deport people.
And a lot of money.
In money, so I think there would be a way to allow, since they have been here, they allow them to find a way to attain a visa and then go on to doing from there.
And the other thing I think is I think a big issue with illegal immigrants is a lot of the motive. So the people that are coming over here and that are dangerous or just or I guess you could say taking jobs, but I think the students have good motives and I think they have a good reason for being here, so I don't think that they're really a threat. I think they would actually contribute to the economy and as the nation as a whole. So I don't think it would be really an issue to keep them.
I think it's being used.
I'm sorry, aren't you separating one group in favor of another though? Okay, well, if you're a student, you're fine, but everybody else is not.
I think the students that have already been through the program should be able to stay because they've already kind of established themselves.
Is it possible that the DACA recipients are being used as leverage in a bargaining or negotiation situation with respect to the entire immigration issue?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Okay. Ladies,
It's a hard question.
we talked a little bit about how you become a citizen. So to be a citizen of the United States, a natural citizen of the United States, you're born here, right? Or in one of our territories, or you're serving on a military, your parents are serving on a military base abroad, something to that effect, right? What if you are somebody who sneaks across the border and you're 9 months pregnant and you have a baby in a border town in Texas, we'll say? Or is that baby automatically an American citizen because they were born here? Okay.
Yeah, as
Or-
long as you're on soil and if you're born here, then you are a citizen.
Do you see any issues there? Have we seen any issues at the border because of that?
Yes, so there's a lot of instances where, we talked about tent cities, correct?
Yeah.
Where there's a lot of people that have had children and the parents were forced to deport and we're actually holding the children in tents, like tent areas, until we decide what we can do with them. I think that's another thing is like the parent knows coming into it what could happen. So that's an issue that they need to really think about before they come.
I would say I think people come pregnant and then have a child and then expect that they'll be able to stay because they have a kid. And I think that's another reason, another thing that could be used as motivation to, you know, okay, I'll have a kid over there and then they can't deport me because I have a child. And so then it's like, that would be just another exception to saying, okay, well, we'll let you stay as well.